Hello, my name is Darren Thomas, and this is Educational Research Techniques. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at questioning strategies and trying to give teachers ideas on how they might want to approach questioning their students. So, as an overview, we're going to go take a look at this from three perspectives, or we have three parts of this presentation. We're going to take a look at the purpose of questioning, the types of questions that you can ask, and also the sequence or the order in which you can present questions. So, there's many different ways that we can try to identify the purpose of questioning. But for our purposes, we're going to look at basically there are two reasons you might want to question your students. One is to assess their understanding. This is an example of what we call formative assessment. In other words, while you are teaching them, you ask them questions to try to get a deeper understanding or to try to assess if they understand what you are doing. So you may be going through a lecture or you may be doing a demonstration, and as you are doing this, you are asking the students questions, quizzing them to make sure they understand so that you can adjust your teaching at that moment if there are difficulties with the students in terms of comprehending the material. A second reason that you may want to answer questions is for expressing thoughts. So, one of our goals as teachers is to instill and to develop critical thinking skills. And this can happen through, the use of classroom discussion. And so as you are in your class interacting with your students, you may ask stimulating questions that will encourage them to express unique thoughts and opinions that can be expressed or challenged in the classroom per se. So these are two purposes for questioning. When you are trying to decide, when to ask questions, you have to think about what is your reason for asking the questions. Now, something that goes along on the similar line in terms of, assessing, understanding, or expressing thought are the types of questions. There are at least two different ways two different types of questions, if you will. They are convergent and divergent. Convergent questionings have, one type of answer. And this is similar to, asking students questions to assess their understanding. An example of a convergent question is, what time is it? So, no matter where we are, if we're all in the same room, we're probably going to have only one possible answer for this question, whatever the temperature is. So there is, if you will, one way. Divergent questioning, this is more in expressing thoughts. Remember, another purpose for asking questions is to express, to get students to express their mind, to express what they're thinking. So an example of a divergent question or a question that can have many answers to it is the idea of who is the greatest athlete of all time. So you can see here that there's no way any two people are going to agree on this. There's going to be many different reasons, many different answers. And what you're trying to do is not so much what they say, but rather how they support their opinion. That is one of the primary goals of divergent questioning. So from this, we know that there are at least two types: convergent, one answer, and divergent, many answers, in terms of the type of question you ask your students. Now, the last thing we want to look at in this little short video is the sequence or the order in which you can ask questions. There are many different ways to see this. You can go from simple questions to complex questions, complex to simple, broad to narrow, narrow to broad. And in many ways, simple to complex and broad to narrow, narrow to broad, they're kind of synonyms for each other, but people see things in a slightly different way. So what do I mean in particular about broad to narrow, narrow to broad? I want to focus on the last two bullets. Let me give you an example. So here is an example of a sequence of questioning that goes from narrow to broad. By narrow, we mean there's not many answers. And by broad, we mean that there are many answers. So in other words, narrow to broad is going from convergent questioning to divergent questioning. So let's take a look at this sequence here. We have a teacher and a student. The teacher says, "What do you see in the picture?" This is an example of a convergent question. There's only one possible answer. The student says, "I see a man with lung cancer smoking a cigarette." Then the teacher replies, "What do you think about smoking after seeing this picture?" That's a divergent question. In other words, now that you've seen the picture, what do you think about it? Again, there's many possible answers. And one thing the student might say is, "I think smoking is bad for you because it could cause health problems." So you can see in this sequence, the teacher goes from a question that only has one answer to a question that can have many answers. Now, let me show you broad to narrow before we conclude. So, here's an example of broad to narrow. So let's take a look at the dialogue here. The teacher says the following question: "What do you think about smoking?" This is a divergent question because students can think many things about smoking. The student says the following: "I think that it," referring to smoking, "is an expensive habit." And so the teacher asked a convergent question, a very specific question. How much did the average person spend on cigarettes in your country last year? Remember, there's probably only one answer for this because the teacher is limiting it to the discussion on cigarettes and how much people in their country spent last year. And the student replies, $800. So let's just say, they were a prior discussion on the cost. And so here you can see that we went from a very broad question, what the student thinks about a given topic, down to a specific question about a specific statistic. And that is the power of this. So in conclusion, we want to try to remember that when you are trying to think of questioning, you have to remember your purpose. Are you trying to check their understanding, and or are you trying to get them to express their opinion? Depending on which of these two goals you have, it affects whether you ask convergent or divergent questions. Convergent questions, one answer. Divergent, many different answers. And you also want to keep in mind how you use these type of questions and in what order. Whether it's from broad to narrow, divergent to convergent questions, if you will, or from narrow to broad, convergent to broad questions. So, this is Darren Thomas, and this is Educational Research Techniques, and thank you for listening.